Hey, Jarek here. Easy Red 2 is a game that a lot of people have told me to play, and all this time I was thinking it was a sequel to a game I had already covered. And that thought actually wasn't too far off, because the previous game I played was called A Front Too Far. I thought it was called Easy Red 1. I don't know why I confused those two. Anyway, with that all said, Easy Red 2 is actually made by the same developer that made A Front Too Far, so again, that thought wasn't too far off. But that brings up another point. This was made by one person. This is an incredibly ambitious game for a single-man project. So how does it fare? Well, surprisingly, it does okay, and can be quite fun. But you know what isn't fun? People messing with your private data, say if you're on a public Wi-Fi network. And that's where today's sponsor comes into play, AtlasVPN. AtlasVPN currently has the most affordable VPN deal at only $1.39 a month for a 3-year deal. And if you don't like it, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. AtlasVPN also stops ads and malware. You get the same fast speed you would usually get with your internet, and you can put it on unlimited devices. So how does AtlasVPN work? Well, a virtual private network takes all of your internet traffic and funnels it through an encrypted tunnel. This will protect you from people or corporations getting information you don't want them to see. It also hides your IP address and your online activities. And since AtlasVPN can change your online location, this allows you to see things you usually wouldn't be able to see. For example, if you have your favorite Netflix show, but you live in America and it's only available in the UK, well, you can change your online location to the UK and watch that show. You can do a similar thing with changing your location to get more affordable products and services. For example, if you switch your location to India, that service is going to cost less. So you may be able to get cheaper Spotify, cheaper YouTube Premium, or cheaper Netflix. This also applies to gaming, by the way. Regional pricing can be kind of absurd, so this can really help. So if you want to try out AtlasVPN for yourself, check that link down below in the video information to get 86% off. Again, that's $1.39 a month for a 3-year deal with a 30-day money-back guarantee. I want to give a big thanks to AtlasVPN for sponsoring this video. And let's get back to Easy Red 2. Judging off the gameplay, I assumed this would be a multiplayer-only game, but looking at Steam, it's apparently single-player, co-op, and multiplayer. It's also very cheap. This thing is like $7 or $8. I bought it on sale for like $1. I can pretty confidently say this game is worth $1. So anyway, what is it? Easy Red 2 is a game that attempts to be more of a simulation rather than your typical arcadey shooter. How much of a simulation is it? Well, I found this game lies somewhere in between Red Orchestra 2 and Arma. It's not full-on milsim like Arma tries to be, but it's also not quite as arcadey as Red Orchestra is. But I find there's another way of judging how much a game tries to be a simulation. Where is it on the Jank Scale? Well, it's definitely more janky than that of Red Orchestra, but it's not as jank as Arma. So in between those two games, it lies somewhere around here. I think graphically, this jankiness really shows through. Now, obviously, this game doesn't look like a AAA title or anywhere close to even a AA title. This was made by a single person. And oh boy, at times, this really shows. Animations are not particularly great when it comes to the weapons. Your hands are also, oh my gosh, look at that. And while textures are not entirely awful, they're also quite a bit lower quality than most games. Audio is also not exactly great. The gun sound effects sound okay at best.
Enemy down. I'm under fire.
And all the voice acting kind of sounds more like they're stand-ins for what will eventually become real voice acting later on.
I'll take the lead. I'm under fire. Grenade.
With all that said, there's this huge asterisk right there. Again, this was made by one person. This is an incredibly ambitious game for a single person, and I feel like it's pretty easy to forgive these downsides, especially when the developer is communicating so openly. Right at the main menu screen, there's this big tab you can click on that says Easy 2 Roadmap. The developer is constantly giving us updates, whether it's patch notes or what their plans are for the future. And most importantly, well, yes, this looks like it was made by one person, because it was. All of these downsides on the graphics don't really hurt the game, they serve their function. Those reloading animations look ugly, sure, but they also look laborious. They're supposed to be slow. You are not supposed to be a super soldier in this game. You are supposed to be vulnerable, disposable. You can't sprint at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Your movement is pretty slow and honestly very clunky. You can't even do a quick 180. If you try to look 90 degrees to the left or right, the game will slow you down. The model in-game physically has to turn when you get that far. It does not feel like you're moving your aim through mud, but if you've ever played a more simulation style game, you know what I'm referring to here. The weapons also have a suitable amount of recoil. You can't just go around Ramboing at things. Or, well, you can try, it just won't work very well. So you can shoot without being like on something, but it's just hip fire and it's very inaccurate. Oh, yes, you die very quickly, but so do your enemies, as long as you're a good shot. Along with the slow reloading and slow aiming and awkward leaning is a proper ballistic system. You are going to need to lead your shots. Thankfully, this game does at least let you see your bullets enough to kind of know where they're going. This game also predictably has a suppression system. If you are getting shot at, your aim is going to go all over the place. This does make it a viable tactic to be shooting at the enemy whether you hit them or not. And if you manage to get shot without taking critical damage, so they didn't shoot your heart or your head, then you're going to start bleeding out and you need to bandage. When you get shot, your aim will go all over the place. You are not going to be able to hit a single thing in that moment. To tie it all together, you also have an inventory system so you don't have unlimited bandages. This inventory system seems complicated, but it's actually not that complicated. In all reality, it's just picking up ammo and bandages and medicine. You really don't have to worry about much else. I'm not sure why they made it look this complicated. It's pretty simple. It is something you need to remember though, because whenever you pick up a gun off an enemy, it only has one magazine, so be sure to pick up their ammo too. Because the gun and the ammo are two different things in their inventory. If you just pick up the gun, you're just picking up the gun with that magazine and the gun, and that's it. Anyway, I think you get the point of this game. Utilizing cover, utilizing tactics, and utilizing teamwork is incredibly important to staying alive. Here's where I would typically talk about the story, but yeah, this isn't really that type of a game. There's no story in a video game sense. This game was based off of World War II battles and factions. There are 5 factions in the game: the Brits, the Germans, the Italians, the Americans, and the Japanese. Once again, this was made by one person. That is an absurd amount of work for one person. Think of all the different weapons and locations that you need to make for 5 different factions. And speaking of teamwork, this game is really interesting how it deals with that when it comes to the single player. When you spawn, you can choose your squad and then choose what person in that squad you want to spawn as. If you choose the squad leader, you can then give commands. These commands may be as simple as attacking and holding a position, or telling your squad to fall back on you. Or these commands could be giving a point to fire artillery, and that's where the squad member with the radio comes into play. He will then call in the artillery. If you're carrying this radio, you have to stop and do this weird numbers minigame. This is an odd way of doing it, but I kind of like this. This basically ensures that you have to stop what you're doing and actually use the radio instead of just pressing OK while still shooting at enemies. And then there are other squad members that you would expect, like a medic and someone else that's carrying a heavy machine gun, etc., etc. Needless to say, using your squad is incredibly important. And you can see your squad in the bottom left at all given times. Once they die, they're dead. But what's interesting is that if you die, you can then choose to spawn instead as one of them, thrown into whatever position they're currently in. Everyone else has Garands. That's just Garand. Ping. I knew. I knew that fucker would have one bullet in his mag. If they all die, well, you gotta spawn back in another squad and start it all over again. So here's what missions you have available to you. You have the Brits versus the Germans, the Americans versus the Japanese, and the Italians versus the Germans. That is really weird. I don't think I've seen that in a game before. Anyway, choosing these different battles will give you a totally different location and obviously totally different guns to use. The actual goal of the level depends on what faction you're on, but it's always one faction attacking the other faction, trying to take over a certain amount of objectives. If the attackers take over all of the objectives, they win. However, do note that both factions have a certain amount of resources, so don't die too much or you'll lose anyway. With that said, this is not sort of a linear path. This isn't like Battlefield Rush or something. You have a lot of freedom to try to go all the way around. This feels a lot more like a full-on sandbox. This leads to drastically different feeling levels. On one level, you have the more open rolling hills of the Western Front. On the next level, you have the more CQB-centric Pacific Islands. On the next level, you might have a completely open field in Italy. There's quite a few missions for every one of these scenarios, and every time you beat a mission, you unlock a new one. But if this still isn't enough for you, you can make your own missions, or download more in the workshop. Yes, this game has workshop support, which I really didn't expect. And again, since every faction is different, you are going to be using different guns for every battle. To make things even better, you can choose what faction you want to play as. So you can play that same exact level from the British side or the German side. Although I don't think all of these are exactly balanced. The Brits and the Germans seem to be pretty equally balanced, so do the Germans and the Italians. But the Americans and the Japanese don't seem to be balanced at all. The Americans have a lot more toys to play with. For the most part, the Japanese get a Type 100, a machine gun, and a bunch of bolt actions. The Americans, on the other hand, get grease guns, Thompsons, Garands, All you hear is the ping. Shotguns. Flamethrowers? Yeah, the Japanese don't stand a chance here. And I know someone's gonna pop in and say, yeah, but that's how World War II worked. This is a video game though, you do need some balance. But that leaves me with one thing to talk about. The vehicles. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really a vehicle person, I'm a big infantry person, so I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time talking here. When you are controlling a tank, you are controlling numerous members of that tank. One person is driving, one person is being the commander, one person shooting, so on and so forth. The game continues trying to be a simulation rather than making you feel like a super soldier. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really play in the tanks very much, so that's all I can really say. But I think I've explained this game enough for you to understand what it is and what it's trying to be. In conclusion, I would say this is actually a surprisingly good game for how affordable it is and the fact that it's made by one person. Yes, that does mean that the graphics, the voice acting, the animations aren't great, but the gameplay is so good that it can be immersive in its own right. I mean, you can just get domed at any given moment. You have to watch what you're doing. You have to be paying attention. I'm really curious to see where this game will end up, because it has a surprisingly decent base for what it is. If you are curious about this game, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's pretty affordable on Steam, and if you don't like it, whatever, it costs like nothing. Big thanks to everyone that joined me over on Twitch while I was streaming this game. My Twitch is twitch.tv/Jarek4GamingDragon. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. And of course, I want to give big thanks to you for watching this video.